Jen and Cam are two funny ladies who like to talk about murder, mass murder, murder-suicide, serial killers, spree killers, thrill killers, contract killings, honor killings, and a whole lot of other shit too heinous for me to list here. If you're disturbed by this sort of content, you may want to listen to something else. And if you're a child trying to listen to our true crime podcast, well, you better ask your mama.
Hey, all you true crime fans, this is Mike Ferguson.
And this is Mike Morphy.
And we'd like to invite you to listen to our podcast, Criminology.
Launched in 2017, we've covered a variety of strange cases from murders to missing persons.
We dive into a variety of cases in both the U.S. and abroad.
Some of the cases are ones you may not have heard of, like the Pocatello babysitter murders or the Canal murders.
Other cases we cover are some of the most historic in true crime, like the Tylenol murders and the Lindbergh kidnapping. We also dive into cases that are currently breaking thanks to DNA and forensic genealogy.
Sometimes you'll hear from people connected to the cases, like the interview we did with the brother-in-law of the Golden State Killer, Joseph D'Angelo.
There are 200 episodes of Criminology available to binge on right now, including full seasons covering the Zodiac Killer, the Golden State Killer, and Ted Bundy, and new episodes come out every Saturday night.
Subscribe to Criminology today, wherever you listen to your podcast.
Hi, Jen.
Hey, Cam, how are ya?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's glad to be back. We've had a whirlwind tour of Illinois and Texas the past 2 weeks.
Yes.
Been out of town.
It was a lot in a short amount of days.
It was, but it was fun. We had a great time. And next episode, we will try to give everybody that we met at the two conferences or conventions a shout out. But for now, we're just going to start off with this case that I have for us today. It's a doozy.
Jen, take it away. I can't wait.
Well, before I start, I want to warn everybody. There is a content warning on here. There is sexual abuse, rape, basically. And also want to say that this case does involve South Africa. So the names are a little bit out of my wheelhouse. So I am doing the best I can. So my apologies if I get anything wrong. All right, you ready?
I'm so ready.
And with that, we start. At the far end of the world, at the bottom of the African continent, lies Scarborough's rocky, windswept beach. A place of exquisite beauty, it is both quaint and wild with pounding waves. It is surrounded by an ancient natural landscape of cliffs and hills and the ever-present, mesmerizing cold waters of the Atlantic Ocean. It's not difficult to understand how this was the favorite swimming spot of 56-year-old former criminal lawyer Anna Cornelius. She was usually at the beach at 7 a.m., ready to take her morning swim. The 25th of March dawned cool, humid, and cloudy. Anna had been at the beach many times on days like this, but on this day, she was recovering from the flu and still experiencing some symptoms and labored breathing. She was not in her usual peak health. Later, once her body was recovered, her husband Willem would say, quote, Anna walked into the ocean and didn't return. This would lead some to speculate that Anna, an all-around force to be reckoned with, had completed suicide. But Willem would later clarify that in the 10 months leading up to March 25th, Anna had become a shell of the person she used to be. He believed that his wife could no longer deal with the rigors of the stormy Atlantic Ocean due to her deteriorating health and mental anguish. Because 10 months before, in May of 2017, their amazing 21-year-old daughter, Hannah Cornelius, was gang raped and murdered in a senseless, brutal, and barbaric attack. Hannah Cornelius was born in February of 1996 to a family of privilege. Her father, Willem Cornelius, was a magistrate, or a judge, in Simonstown, South Africa, on the eastern side of the Cape Peninsula, just a 20-minute ride from Scarborough. Her mother, Anna, was a criminal lawyer. Hannah's brother, Dries, who is autistic, runs out the family. Hannah was a bright, loving, gifted girl with a real talent for playing the piano. She attended the prestigious Redham House private school and made excellent grades. Everybody who knew her said that she was extremely comfortable in her own skin And in fact, it's very evident if you look at any photograph of her. Her father described her as a child for the new South Africa, a child, quote, without the baggage of our generations. Hannah had little interest in money or material things, with no prejudice regarding race, religion, or social standing. In fact, she gravely told her parents that she wanted to leave the church they attended because it did, quote, did not make provisions for her Muslim friends to go to heaven. When Hannah was 16, her family wanted to throw her a big party for her birthday, but she declined, saying that she could not, in good conscience, accept expensive gifts or spend a lot of money on a party when so many around her lived in abject poverty. Instead, she made up gift packs, and she distributed them to children in nearby communities. And actually, this is something that she would repeat on her birthday every year. She also declined a brand new car from her parents, which at 16, that's kind of a big deal. So instead of a brand new car, she settled, well, she's not even settled, but she wanted her grandmother's 1984 blue Volkswagen City Golf. It's a cute little car, but it was 1984, and we're talking this, you know what I mean? It was an old car by the time she even had it.
But she thought it was vintage, probably.
Probably. It was cute. After high school graduation, she decided to attend nearby Stellenbosch University on the eastern edge of Cape Town. Stellenbosch is in a hilly region of the Cape Winelands, and it's sheltered in a valley and flanked by mountains. It was the Irene Ladies' Residence, sort of like a dorm, that Hannah excitedly moved into in 2015 to begin her humanities degree. I mean, what other degree would she get, right? Founded in 1963, the residence is nestled in one of the most beautiful areas of Stellenbosch, and it's located at the end of Victoria Street. It looks out upon a peaceful nature reserve. The Irene residence was named after the Greek goddess of peace, and of course, lining the walls of the residence are photos of every woman who has ever won the Nobel Peace Prize. On the night of the 26th of May, 2017, Hannah decided to hang out with some friends. She and her friend Cheslin Marsh, whom she met at university, went to the Bohemia Bar in Stellenbosch to go dancing and have a few drinks. And they played dominoes. They had a few drinks at the Indrax men's residence. The pair, who were not romantically involved, purely platonic, noticed that it had gotten quite late, and they decided it was time to leave. Well, when Hannah realized that Cheslin, who didn't own a car, was going to ride his skateboard home and at dark at night, she insisted that she give him a ride in her blue City Golf car. When they get to Cheslin's house on the other side of town, the two sat talking. And of course, the windows were down, and they were just parked outside a tire dealership. As Cheslin was getting ready to get out of the VW, two men suddenly appeared at the side of the car. One, Geraldo Parsons, held a sharpened screwdriver on Hannah through the window. The other, Vernon Vitboy, held a knife to Cheslin and said, quote, "Sit still or she dies." Vitboy forced Cheslin into the back seat and took his place in the front, forcing Hannah in the middle of the two front seats. Eben Vandekerk and Nashville Julius climbed into the back seat, sandwiching Cheslin between them. The men robbed Cheslin of his cell phone and some cash. Hannah, trying to think of a way out of what was happening, hid her keys. One of the men threatened to kill them if she didn't turn them over, though. And at this point, Nashville Julius decided that he really didn't want a part of what might come next, so he decided to leave. And there's actually CCTV footage showing him getting out of the car and walking away. They did give him a cell phone and some cash for his part of the robbery. Right? I know. So that's all for Nashville Julius. He's gone. Totally walks away. That left Hannah and Cheslin in the car with Geraldo Parsons, Eben Vandekerk, and Vernon Vitboy. Hannah asked the men not to take her car because it belonged to her grandmother and it was very sentimental, and they reassured her that they just wanted her to drive them home. Yeah, that's the first of their lies. From the first moment these men saw the car parked, they immediately decided that they were going to steal it. So after having found the keys, they headed towards the Helshoeta Pass using a gravel road. Eventually, they pulled over and ordered Cheslin Marsh into the trunk of the car. They drove for quite a long time. Cheslin could hear people talking, but he couldn't exactly make out what they were saying. He was terrified, panicked, claustrophobic, and above all, he was worried. I mean, he's sitting there thinking, what the hell are they going to do with me? What's going to happen? Those both, Can you imagine? Terrifying?
No.
Finally, the car stopped in Crofontaine, and they opened the trunk. Parsons, Vitboy, and Vanderkerk were joined by another man who they referred to as, I don't know if I should say this. The next word is a racial slur in South Africa, so I don't know if I should say this, but here's it goes. Vanderkerk were joined by another man who they referred to only as Kafferke. Now, this is a derogatory name. It's a racial slur in Afrikaans. The root word is now referred to as the K word. Much like in the U.S., we use the term the N word. This man was never named officially, and he's never been arrested. My apologies for saying that word, but from now on, we're going to refer to him as K. Okay. Later, when Parsons talked to the police, he would say that the man was a drug dealer, quote, a Kosha man, and that he didn't know his name. Now, the Kosha is the second largest ethnic group in South Africa behind the Zulu. So the Xhosa man, or the man that we're calling K, gave Vitboy and Parsons, quote, tig and daga, which is meth and cannabis. And sometimes tig is referred to as tick lolly in South Africa, whatever. But at this point, the men proceeded to smoke while in the car.
They obviously know this fella, right?
Yeah, he's the drug dealer. Mm-hmm.
But is he friends with them or not so much?
I'd say they're pretty close for about what's going to happen.
Oh, geez.
I mean,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I just, with the slur, I wasn't sure if that was,
right.
Like you, yeah. Okay.
Now, just a side note, meth was not a very prominent drug in South Africa until about 2008, and now it's the leading illegal drug used in the country. Why? Because it's cheap and it's easy to make. So after smoking, the men robbed Cheslin Marsh of his jacket, diamond earrings, and his bank card. They asked him for his PIN number, but Cheslin told him there wasn't any money in the account. And when they insisted on the PIN number anyway, because they wanted to see for themselves, Cheslin gave them the wrong PIN number. CCTV footage shows one of the men entering the gas station at about 4:30 in the morning. Now, it shows him trying to get the money from the bank, from the little ATM thing.
Did they force him to do it? And they stayed,
No. One of the guys,
sight?
I think Geraldo Parsons, went in to get the money. But as the car is entering the gas station parking lot, there's video footage that shows Hannah in the passenger seat. And that's the last time she's seen alive. Now, according to all the testimonies given later, Hannah Cornelius had grown very quiet at this stage and stared directly ahead into the endless darkness of the night. Hannah didn't fight her kidnappers, nor did she argue with them. And it's difficult to know exactly what she was feeling aside from pure terror. But it seems as if at this point she just realized that they weren't just going to let her go. From the trunk, Cheslin could hear Hannah ask in a soft, frightened voice where they were going and what they were going to do. And by this time, it was 5:30 in the morning, and the men were still driving around, occasionally stopping to buy or take drugs. Finally, they stopped in a remote, bushy area near a vineyard in Bernardino Heights and dragged Cheslin Marsh out of the trunk of the car. The men yelled at him for giving him the wrong PIN number and as they were walking him into the bush. Once they got to a tree where there were some bricks lying on the ground, the men instructed him to lay down and put his head on the bricks.
Oh, God.
Cheslin looked up, pulse pounding and terrified, and he saw two of the men holding bricks in their hands. He said a prayer, and then the world went dark. Or should I say, and then his world went dark. Meanwhile, the reason for Hannah's quiet demeanor became evident. While staring out into the murky landscape of distant mountains and placid vineyards, she realized the night would not end well for her. Especially now that her friend Cheslin had been left in a field somewhere. She didn't even know if her friend was dead or not. Now, at this point, Parsons would later claim that while he was driving, Vitboy handed him a condom and said, quote, "She said we could have sex with her, but we have to let her go after that." Now, this is him claiming, and he said this on trial, whether this is true or not, they were dirty liars, so it's really hard
And I think confronted that with that, you're going to do anything to try to stay alive. So
I don't blame her whatsoever.
No, that's what I mean. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Doesn't change the story.
No, not at all. Parsons would go on to add, quote, "I could see in her eyes that she was terrified. She said we could have sex with her, but she didn't want to." And he also said, too, the scumbag, that he had a wife and kids at home and he didn't want to do it, but he did it anyway.
I'm still floored about the first guy that took off. Didn't want any part of it.
He took off. He knew what was going to happen. But he knew what was going to happen. Yeah. Hannah, now alone in the car with 4 men, Parsons, Vitboy, Vanderkirk, and the man only known as K, was driven to Reaper's paintball range on Bottlery Road, just outside of Brackenfell. And that's where all 4 men raped her. During the trial, one of them reported that she had to forcibly stop herself from crying during the assault. I can't. It's horrible. No words. Afterwards, they put Hannah in the trunk of her car and continued driving. They drove her to the area near Grenoff Farm. Parsons said that when the car came to a stop, he opened the trunk and he was ready to let her go. But Hannah began to panic. And even though she had done everything that they'd asked and she had given them everything they wanted, she knew it didn't matter. As the sun began to rise, Hannah clung to the inside of the trunk, desperate to find leverage to delay the fate that she knew was coming. As Parsons wrestled with Hannah to release her from the car, Vanderkirk, not wanting to be bothered with a fight, walked up and stabbed her in the throat.
Ugh.
Parsons let go of her as the blood began to flow, and an autopsy would later show that she was stabbed twice in the throat and that without immediate medical attention, the wounds would have been fatal. But that wasn't enough for these men. Vernon Vitboy, according to Parsons, tripped Hannah, and as she fell to the ground, he picked up an 82-pound rock and threw it at her head. This caused the skull base to fracture, and these fractures extended to the orbital, nasal, and oral cavities, and it killed her almost instantly. 82-pound rock. He just picked it up and lobbed it at her. It took 2 men to take it into trial. While Hannah's body would be discovered around 8:30 in the morning, Cheslin Marsh regained consciousness sometime shortly after. He stumbled around trying to find a phone to call the police. Finally, he made it to a house and climbed over the wall. The residents, fearing he was a gang member, refused to help him and chased him away. Luckily, a police car was passing by at the time. The police officer drove him to the hospital and put an APB out on Hannah Cornelius's car and began listening to Cheslin's story of what had started 5 hours earlier. On North Pine Drive between Brackenfell and Criefontaine, the men robbed another woman of her bag, her phone, wallet, and pearls. And around 1 p.m., the group of men kidnapped yet another woman, Mimi October, and drove to an ATM where they took out 1,000 rand, or $58 from her account. They took both of her phones, her wedding ring, and then they let her go. The men continued to drive around, stopping at various ATMs to retrieve more money from Ms. October's account, totaling 3,000 rand, which is about $200. Finally, the men were growing nervous about still being in Hannah's car, and they were anxious to sell it. They needed to get rid of it right away. Plus, they were getting kind of tired. It was a long night of thieving and murdering, bastards.
Meth doesn't, you crash after a while.
Eben Vanderkirk took a nap in the back seat. He just got tired, so he started to sleep.
How could you?
I know. With that going, with what you did
on around you, and I'm just gonna go take a little break. I'll be back.
Wake me up when we get the next person. Yeah,
terrible.
Around 2-ish, they paid K 300 rand, which is what, $18 for his help that night.
Oh.
And then he left, and shortly thereafter, Vanderkirk also left to go home. He received 1,000 rand, which, like I said before, is $58. That's all for killing a couple people, leaving one for dead. Yeah, that's it.
Unreal.
There's no words, really.
Mm-mm.
Now it was just Parsons and Vitboy, and they needed to ditch the car. They started driving towards Delft because they believed that they could sell it there.
Oh, so they're not even going to ditch it. They're going to try to sell it.
They're going to try to sell it, yes. On their way, a police officer saw them, and he had just received the APB describing the very distinct 1984 VW City Golf. I mean, there couldn't have been that many.
A lot of them.
Mm-hmm. And he pursued them on a high-speed chase.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, the VW was no match for the police car, and Parsons and Vitboy leapt out of the car at a local farm and made a run for it. They were both apprehended and taken to a hospital where they were examined, and DNA was taken. Now, they're guilty. They confess. Cheslin has, of course, said the entire story, right? But aside from the man that we only know as K, all 4 men would get their comeuppance. Nashville Julius, the man who didn't participate in any of the assaults, and the one that left right after the robbery, he was given 22 years in prison and was considered a good candidate for rehabilitation, which I'm not so sure.
I'm glad he got 22 years.
Exactly. The youngest was 27 years old. The oldest was 33 years old. So it's like, it's not just those reckless youth days, you know?
Mm-mm.
They knew. But let's say for the rest, there's no doubt that these men were guilty. You know, during the men's trial, DNA analyst Blanche Stubbs testified that he found Vitboy's DNA on the opening of a 2-liter bottle of a soft drink that was left at the scene. And DNA was also found on the left side door of the hijacked car. Parsons' DNA was found on a condom packet, which was located in the area where Hannah was raped. And Hannah's DNA would also be found on that condom packet, on a knife, and in various parts of Vitboy's and Parsons' bodies. While another DNA profile was found among the evidence, it's not in any database and could not be matched. So we're assuming, and they're assuming, that it belongs to the kosher man called K.
Mm-hmm.
Even with all this evidence, the testimony of Cheslin Marsh, who identified at least 2 of them, the testimony of Mimi October, and the fact that they were caught driving Hannah's car, they all pled not guilty.
Mm-hmm.
Unsurprisingly, when the men talked about the events, they always blamed all the decisions on each other. They even tried to blame their behavior on drugs, but it's clear from the CCTV footage that they could all perfectly walk fine and they could function. I mean, they were able to drive a car well enough not to raise any alarms. It was clear that they discussed where they were going to go. They didn't have any issues. So it's obvious that drugs were not responsible. Parsons at least admitted that he didn't feel like doing it, but he did it anyway. I mean, that's probably the closest thing to the truth that any of them said.
But, and we've talked about this so much. Isn't there any moment, a flicker of a second where you think, you know what, this is not a good idea. Let's not do this.
Let's stop.
And
Well,
not one of them?
Nashville Julius did. He walked away.
He did, but he knew what was going to take place.
Exactly. But he didn't tell anybody.
He could have stopped it all.
He could have. Vitboy, Vanderkirk, and Parsons, who had all been in prison before, were given a life sentence. When the culprits were examined at the hospital, it became very clear that these men were members of the notorious Numbers Gang of South Africa. The Numbers Gangs are prison gangs with complex hierarchies, rules, and rituals. Now, by examining these men's bodies, law enforcement could tell which gang they belonged to and what rank they had. Vernon Vitboy, who's 33, was a colonel in the 28th gang. Geraldo Parsons, was 27, was a sergeant in the 28th gangs. His tattoos included crossed swords, a gun, a grotesque sketch of a naked, headless female body with legs spread open, and stars on his shoulder depicting his gang rank. Vanderkirk was 28, and he's a member of the 26th gang. Now, let's talk about the Numbers Gang a minute. And this is where my names are totally going to...
I think you've been doing a pretty good job so far, might I say.
Legend has it that the Numbers Gang started as a social movement to protect black miners in the 1800s. The founders of the group were the Nangolaza and the Kilikian. Hopefully I said that right. Kilikian. Poe, a nomad, had discouraged them from working in the mines because young black men who worked the mines were dying in droves. Poe taught 2 boys how to rob coaches and how to live a life of crime. Poe then found 15 other young men to join his different groups. Thus, Nangazola had 7 people in total in his gang, and Kilikian had 8. The 2 gangs work separately. Nangolaza at night and Kilikian during the day.
So they work the same area, just different shifts.
Right. First shift and second shift, I guess.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah. So how the gangs got their names kind of went like this. The number 2 is for the 2 founding members. Then 7 for Nagolaza members and 8 for Kilikian. And then the 2 men went their separate ways, right? So there was 7 people in the first gang, 8 people in the second gang with 2 founders. So 2, 8, 2, 7. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And when the 2 men went their separate ways, conflict inevitably ensued. So the 26s were started, and they are the mediators of the 2 groups. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's just a lot.
It's a lot. So there's the 28 and 27s are rival gangs, and then the 26 comes in and mediates between the 2.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that old joke, whatever, 7, 8, 9, remember?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So many years later, they were and still are today a prison gang. A prison gang, of course, is an organization that operates within the prison system as a self-maintaining criminal entity. They usually consist of a select group of inmates with an established code of conduct and ranks, which governs the chain of command. And that's not to say that they don't work outside of the prison system, because they do. The 28th, 27th, and 26th all have different jobs. If a person has a different gang affiliation on the outside, once they are in prison, that affiliation is forgotten and put on hold. In prison, you either belong to one of the numbers or you're just a regular prisoner. It's estimated that there are about 80,000 to 100,000 gang members in about 130 different gangs in Cape Town. And those in the gangs are responsible for 70% of all the crimes. What drives gangsterism and gang culture in South Africa is wide and various, much more intricate than one episode of that we can go into, by the way. But let's just say it's the same as America, pretty much. Low income, low self-esteem, lack of family or a steady home life, being raised in a subculture of violence, no chance of opportunity or experiences in their lives, substance abuse, poverty, lack of access to support structures, which is like education, healthcare, help with mental health, abuse issues. It all contributes to what leads a person to a gang. Because if you take a child whose parents are destitute, on drugs, or alcoholics, they work 80 hours a week, or gone all the time, these children are left vulnerable to gangs. Mm-hmm. Gangs replace the adolescent's family. Refusal to join a gang can often leave an adolescent even more vulnerable. And I want to add, there's an episode on True Crime South Africa by our friend Nicole, where she speaks to Dr. Liza Grobler about prison gangs. The episode was put out in April of 2022, and it's titled Prison by Numbers. It's extremely interesting. I suggest...
I'll be listening to it.
Yeah. And also, I want to thank Nicole. She helped us find the court documents for this case. So,
yay, Nicole.
She's awesome. I love her. If you don't listen to True Crime South Africa, what you doing with your life? Seriously, she's good. And she's got a great accent. Love it. All right. So oftentimes the teenagers are targeted for initiation, or those who seek initiation, and the ones that do have no future. Most don't even finish high school. And as for a job, the unemployment rate in South Africa is high. It was 35.3% last year. So these teens look at the gang and think, that's the only way I'll be able to earn money. And, this is if a gang member who regularly rapes and murders and commits other criminal acts finishes the job of parenting by, quote, raising one of these young adults. That teenager is going to obviously grow up having no respect for life or have a frame of reference for what is considered decent behavior. It takes a village, and if your village is pretty fucking... Oops, sorry. Cut that. It takes a village to raise a child, and if your village is kind of crappy, then, you reap what you sow, right?
Well, I think the problem over there a lot of time is there is no village. That's the problem. So
that's what I mean. The village that they turn the village that they turn to is the gang village, right?
Same thing here. Same thing here.
It's exactly the same thing. So all 4 men who assaulted Cheslin Marsh and then raped and murdered Hannah Cornelius were gang members with no education. Some didn't even make it to high school and had been in prison at least once, raised in abject poverty, and had virtually no family structure as children. People were outraged that these men looked bored in court. These men laughed and even posted on social media throughout the hearing. There's like videos of them, and they're smiling as big as can be, and they're laughing and joking with each other. They're sitting on the bench.
How do they have access to devices
Thank
to do
you.
that?
I have no idea. No idea. But it's infuriating to watch these videos. I'll post some of them in the show notes. But it was like they were up on charges for stealing a candy bar, and it was just like a goof. They were just goofing. It's horrible. They're horrible. When the men were sentenced, they were not remorseful and didn't even seem to care. They had no fear of police and no fear of jail because they were pretty much going home. They were headed to the place that helped make them. A twist of irony is that they're the very type of people that Hannah Cornelius wanted to help. One of the perpetrators went to prison, leaving children on the outside, primed and ready to repeat the cycle. Cheslin Marsh sustained a moderate to severe skull fracture, a fractured arm, multiple lacerations, and head trauma that resulted in him having a metal plate. He was also left deaf in one ear. He couldn't afford a hearing aid, so a fundraiser was established to assist in obtaining one. He was a theology student and was so traumatized by the events of May 27th that he couldn't concentrate on his studies, so he dropped out of Stellenbosch University. The school eventually wiped out any of his remaining student debt. Hannah's mother, Anna, could no longer face going to work as a criminal lawyer, and so she quit her practice. She immediately set up the Hannah Cornelius Foundation. And from the description on the website, the foundation is described as the following. The vision of HCF is to support children and youth who are at risk, to help them become empowered and break out of the cycle of violence in our communities. Our vision is to empower at-risk youth in terms of education, counseling, guidance, sexual health education, and facilities to present them as alternative options and opportunities in life. If she had not drowned on that rocky beach in March of 2018, Anna's voice would most likely be among the loudest support of the foundation's goals. Hannah's brother, Dries, has never been able to process that his sister's not coming home. He asks his father every day when she's coming to visit next. Hannah's father, Willem, also left his job as a magistrate because he said he was concerned that he would no longer be able to remain impartial when judging cases because of what happened to his daughter. He is quoted as saying, "Me and my son are not a family. We are the survivors who live in the ruins of what once was." Although there are not very many photographs on Hannah's Instagram account, there are a few that give a glimpse to her world. A photo of her and her brother with the caption, #Granny's 91st, #FamilyTime. There's photos of seashells and the lovely Scarborough Beach with the caption, "Gotta love home." They were posted just 6 months before she died. There are many photos of her cats, and animals were another one of her passions. She also volunteered for the Tears Animal Group. And like most young women, the occasional selfie was not beyond her. So it only seems fitting that we give Hannah Cornelius the last word in the story. Her Instagram tagline reads, "I hope you learn to let go of everything in this world that isn't worth keeping." Is that okay to end it like that?
Yeah, it's just, what a waste, you know?
Did it sound okay? I felt like I really rushed it.
No, and you did pretty darn good with the words, but heck if I know how you really pronounce them. Like, if you know what I mean?
That's as best as
Sounded
I
right to
forgot
me.
it. That's Hannah's story, and it's infuriating and heartbreaking.
So
They're
those guys will
ruthless.
never get out of jail, right? Like, is their life in prison truly life, or is it
As
not?
far as I know, to tell you the truth, I didn't really look into it because I just considered that it would be life in prison. I would hope. I mean, this case shook
Yeah, it's terrible.
their area, South Africa.
Just recently, this has to do with this. My boyfriend Louis Thoreau, you know who I adore. Call me Louis. I mean it. Anyway, he went to Johannesburg, which I've been there, but I never really got into the town. Thank goodness, because it's a little rough. But so he went with these hired people that they weren't police officers because the police officers were a little scared, wouldn't quite do their job, which I cannot blame them. And I was like, who thinks of this? So these gangs would go in and take over an apartment building. So what they would do is they'd have all the tenants pay them the rent. So the landlords are the ones that would reach out to these people and say, you have to help me. Like they've taken over the building. They trash it, where they stay, but then it's on lockdown. And so they are basically stealing the rent that would normally go to the landlord, and they have to go in there. And during it, like this guy was shot and stuff. And it's just a different kind of way of life,
It is. It's scary. I mean, it still doesn't stop me from wanting to go visit.
Oh, no,
I mean,
of
it's
course.
beautiful down there. But like the whole thing, and these men, like at one point, Parsons said that he like begged Vitboy to like, don't kill her. We already killed Cheslin. Like they thought he was dead. Mm-hmm. But let's leave her. But no, Vitboy just went ahead and threw that huge rock on her. There's just no regard for human life whatsoever. None.
Happens a lot, as we know. That was truly unbelievable.
Horrifying.
I've been to South Africa. It's truly beautiful. It's majestic. It's like any other place in the world. It really feels like you're not, I don't know. It doesn't feel like you're on Earth. I know that's a weird thing to say, but that's sort of how I felt. You did a good job. I think you also did really well with the names, Jen.
The names are hard. I'm not going to lie, because it's Dutch. There's a lot of Dutch and German in there. And it's fun. I tried my best and pronouncenames.com. And also there's a video that's going to be in the show notes done by Times Live, I believe. Tried to learn what he said. But still, it's with my weak American tongue, I did my best. But yeah, it's a horrifying story. And
I understand. Believe me. I put on, I think I put on maybe it was my personal one. I don't know. I have 2 new students from Afghanistan in my class. One of their names is really easy to pronounce. The other one, I can't get it. And everybody's like, have him say it. He said it to me for 2 days. I still can't get it. I had another student who's from Iraq come and try to help me. And so she did go talk to him and got what she thought was the Americanized version of his name. So I'm all happy. I have my little piece of paper at the front of the class. And I'm like, I got you. And I say it. And he's like, nope. And of course he laughs because the whole class laughs because I'm an idiot. But I am bound and determined that I'm going to get this name. But pronouncenames.com does not have it. Some people recommended some stuff. Our good friend Darren from Weird Darkness recommended a site. Nope, they don't have that name either. So it must be an unusual name in Afghanistan.
Or a nickname, maybe?
No, it's his real name, I think. I mean, it's on his,
It's frustrating because you want to get it right.
Well, I do.
And
it's a sign of respect,
It is.
I don't want to call him anything but his name.
Right.
So they just got here from Afghanistan 3 years ago, and they came from an inner city school to us. And so I don't know, like I went to the principal and I'm like, did they have a English as second language teacher? Do they have, and they're like, nope. And I'm like, okay, well, this is not, I need help.
Right.
I need help. So if any of our listeners from Afghanistan can speak English and help me out with this name, hit me up because I would truly appreciate it. And how it's spelled and how when he speaks it, does not look like what it's spelled like at all. It starts with the GH, and it almost sounds like he's doing an R, but like with a deep throat guttural kind of like a rolling R, I guess. So anyway, so there's that. And then also I thought, speaking of Darren from Weird Darkness, let's talk about our fun-filled 2 last weekend, shall we?
Oh, let's do. Our first weekend, we went to Champaign, Illinois, to the Dark History and Horror Convention. It was so much fun. I loved it. We spent
It was a little bit different than what we're normal, like what we have done in the past, but I had a blast. I loved it. I thought it was amazing.
Oh, we both got our bones read, which is like tarot, but
bones. Well, you have trinkets almost.
Trinkets, yeah. A huge bowl full of trinkets that they pour into a bigger bowl. And then depending on where they land and how they're nestled in, they read that and tell us your future or tell us what's going on with your life, what you need to do. Also met a great man by the name of Jeff Craig. He's a cartographer. This was fun. I didn't buy a lot of things, but I did buy this. he made a map of the United States that has all the cryptids locations, like per state. You can, like all the cryptids in Missouri, and they're all marked. I'm not even explaining this correct. It's called Map in Black. You can find him on Facebook. I believe he's got a website.
It's a clever name. I love it.
It is.
Map
but
in Black!
He said he started from, of course, with nothing to do during COVID. And he sat and mapped out his home state, which is Ohio. And it was all the ghosty sightings, all the UFO sightings, all the cryptid sightings, murders, big famous murders. And he posted it, like he marked it on a map. And then he did the entire United States. And it is amazing. I absolutely love it. And I want to actually get him a print to hang downstairs of Missouri. Just of Missouri. And if you would want that of your state, you can go ask him to do that. Mapinblack.com, MAPINBLACK.com. I'll also put it in the show notes. He was amazing. So nice.
But don't forget our good friend Brandon. I guess we're going to give everybody a shout out since we only met a few people. I mean,
Yeah.
we met a ton. Let's put it this way. This was more like a horror and scary kind of thing. So they
slasher
had
films. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. So it wasn't really podcast. So when people saw us a lot, they'd be like, oh, podcast, no. And they just keep walking, which of course made us giggle. But anyway, our good friend Brandon from Southern Gothic was there. So we hung out with him. And Darren from Weird Darkness, amazing. We actually went on his show live from the set, from the convention. That was
And Camille's
cool.
like, you better talk, Jennifer, because, you talk more than I do. Yeah, that's wrong.
Oh, okay. So then we'll fast forward that to this weekend when we did a Spotify live.
But don't.
And Jen talked the whole time. So
you put me in charge. That's what happens when you put me in charge.
Yeah, well.
But anyway, the weekend before, back to the dark history and horror, we also met a podcast that from St. Louis called the Riverlands Podcast. They were so much fun. Great people. They kind of do more folklorish stuff about
it's pretty cool.
the Missouri area.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
By the way.
Love it. And then who else
Check
did we
them
meet
out.
there? We saw Leatherface 3 from the movie.
Mhm.
Leatherface.
Edward Furlong, don't
He was
forget.
there. And don't forget the London twins, Jeremy and Jason. Couldn't tell them apart. I mean, you could tell them apart. They're not identical twins any longer. But
We've all aged. Let's just put it that way.
But I never knew which one was which. Our friend Bob Mata from Defense Diaries was there. E.J. Hammond, who wrote a book coming out on Ted Bundy, who we should probably have on our show. She's the end-all, be-all Ted Bundy person to go to. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. We'll probably do it next year. So
Champaign, Illinois, we'll let you know.
Yeah.
Probably be in August. It was super fun, and that town was really cute. So that was kind of cool. I've never
I'd like
been
to
there.
spend a little bit more time there too.
Yep. So that brings us up to dun-da-da-da. Last weekend, the True Crime Podcast Festival in Dallas, Texas, where everything's bigger in Texas.
It is. Speaking of which, we met Woody Overton for Real Life, Real Crime. And one of his security men is larger
Billy?
than life. Billy.
I
swear.
Billy.
Billy's about 7 foot tall, but 15 foot tall with personality. I swear. He's
He's a talker. He could give Jen a run for her money. Let's put it that way.
He was great. I loved him. If you go to, we still need to post that on our Twitter feed and our True Crime Podcast discussion page. I'll probably try to do that tonight. But yeah, come see pictures. I look absolutely horrible, but I don't care. But we had so much fun. We want to thank all the listeners that came out to see us. And
that
yeah.
really came out to see us.
Yeah, like showed up
for us.
Yeah,
that's shocking to me. Still, I told Jen, I told you I still feel like I have imposter syndrome. Like somebody's gonna be like, "You suck," which I mean, granted, in the reviews sometimes they do, but like they're gonna, you're terrible, go away. And then yet we have people that come up and say the nicest things, and then I'm like, oh my god, I love you, thank you.
Nice little ego boost. And when I say ego boost, it just got us a little bit off the gutter. So, but yeah, it was awesome.
Well, we're not lying in the gutter anymore. We're sitting in it.
We're just sitting in it. We're just sitting.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was amazing. And True Crime Podcast Festival is now, I believe, being changed to True Crime Paranormal Festival. So next
that
year
will
it'll be in
Austin.
Austin, Texas, and we expect you all to be there. I'm not going to lie. We expect you to be there.
Truth. We do. All right. Well, I think that about wraps us up for this. Oh, let me mention this real quick, too. Woo-wee. Did you watch that Army Hammer special yet?
I have not yet. I was working on
House
this.
of Hammer. Okay, first of all, he's the cutest thing since baby puppies. However, talk about, it just goes to show, and this is the upcoming case that I have, abuse cycles. It just, it keeps going and going and going. It's the same thing. So I followed it when it happened because I was shocked. I was going to say something else, but I'm not going to. But I learned a lot more in there. And, it just goes to show you can have all the money in the world, but it doesn't buy you class. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. So, abuse begets abuse. It's a never-ending cycle.
Begets abuse. So
Exactly.
There's like four lines of it there. So there you go.
Oh, it probably goes further back.
Yeah. So anyway, that's it. And we have a very special Our True Crime podcast episode coming up. Cannot wait to share that for you. But that's all I'm going to say about that because,
pay attention for the next few weeks or so. Yep. We will be dropping it not on a Wednesday, but just on a whenever day.
Yep.
So, yeah.
There you go. All right, Jen. Remember, lock your doors.
And keep passing by those open windows.
Bye-bye.
Love ya. Today's episode was researched and written by me, Jen. For more information about this episode, as well as all other sources, please check out our show notes or the podcast website at ourtruecrimepodcast.com. Our True Crime Podcast is developed and created by the hosts, Jen and Cam. Original music and audio mix of all our True Crime Podcast episodes is courtesy of Nico Vertese from We Talk of Dreams. You can reach Nico at wetalkofdreams.com. Listener discretion is provided by Edward October from Octoberpod VHS. You can find all of his great works on YouTube. Please make sure to like and subscribe to Our True Crime Podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. We can be reached on Instagram and Facebook at Our True Crime Podcast or on Twitter with the handle at Our True Crime Pod. You can also email us at ourtruecrimepodcast@gmail.com. We would also at this time like to thank our patrons. We would be so lost without you. Thank you so much. And if you would like to help support the show, you can check us out on patreon.com/Our True Crime Podcast. You can also show your support by leaving a 5-star review on Apple or simply just tell your friends about us. It's that easy. Love ya.